So thank you all for being with us. Welcome on behalf of Plano Public Library, and we are really pleased to have a special guest with us today, Debra Austin with Chaos to Results Business Coaching. Debra is an amazing volunteer with the library. She's a world traveler. She's mother of 2 Eagle Scouts. She's a library lover and a lifelong learner. And she has tremendous things to bring to us today. I hope that you'll all enjoy her presentation, and you will be receiving a follow-up email with a link to resources that Debra has put together for you. And I will introduce Debra, and I'll be back at the end to give you a little bit more information about some library resources, but we're very thankful to have Debra with us today. Debra, take it away.
So good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you guys. I get to talk about one of my favorite topics today, and that's from surviving to thriving. So it's all about setting and achieving goals, but it's a lot more than that. I bet if we took a poll, that just about everybody on this call today would say they set goals and maybe they started them and then they fell off. And along with that sometimes comes a lot of baggage. But what I want to do today is to share with you some of the reasons why we're not successful with our goal setting, some of the things we need to do differently, and then we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into exactly what we need to change to make it so we change those outcomes and become more successful. And then towards the end, I'll share some resources with you too that they'll be sent out in the email so you will have them. The resource is actually a workbook that follows what we're going to cover, but it allows you to go back and take a little time, do a little deeper dive for yourself, and work from there. So with that being said, my first question to you guys just to think about for a moment is, what is it that keeps us from being as successful as we would like to be? And there are really 5 things that always come up. The first one is autopilot, where we're doing things because that's what we always done and we keep doing that. The second one is mindset. What are we thinking? And we'll talk about why that's so important. The third one there is really all about what we call junk food. And I don't mean just the food that we're physically eating. I mean the things that we're actually feeding our mind. Fourth one is procrastination, where we're putting things off that need to happen for us to achieve what we want. And last but not least is fear. The things that actually make us and help us to thrive are almost the counter opposite of those, but there are some things that we don't think a lot about. One is having a vision. So when we talk about that vision, what does that mean? That gives us a direction. It gives us where we need to go and how we're going to get there. There's the mindset. Again, what are we thinking? We talked about that as being a reason that we fail, but it's also a reason that we succeed. The third thing we need to have is a real plan as to how we're going to get it done. Most of us know that when we don't have a plan or even a few things that we want to get done, somehow they don't get done for the most part. Fourth one is scorekeeping. And the last one, I think is just as critical as all of the rest, is having a partner to help you stay accountable to yourself. So we're going to dig just a little bit deeper into each one of these and talk about what these success factors are. And then we'll talk about some of those failure factors that will help you change the outcomes that you get. So when I think about visioning, and when you think about it, I want you to consider where it is you want your life to be in 3 years or 5 years or even 10, whatever that horizon is for you. I want you to think about what are the things that you want to have or to have accomplished. And then what are the things you want to leave behind so you can make that happen? So in this image here, I want you to think about that little boat as something that comes in and allows you to take the stuff you need to get rid of and put into that boat and let it go. And then the other side of it is a new boat comes in and I want you to put the things that you do want to have. So when I say that, I'm thinking about failures that you may continue to think about and go around in circles on it. Bad decisions that still haunt you. Maybe even some good things or opportunities that you missed Again, they've passed, they've gone, so let those go. And then what are the things that you want to move towards? What is it you want? When you think about those goals, why are you setting them? What are you trying to change in your life? Covey has a really, really great way of putting this. He talks about begin with the end in mind. And when we do that, it gives us clarity as to where we want to go, but it also begins to help us identify the things that we need to do to achieve it. Along with that is that when we talk about this vision, we need to have it so it's something that we really want, something that we treasure, something that we're willing to work for. Because when you set goals and you don't have a clear purpose for them, they're not meaningful for us, and we're a lot less likely to go after them and try and make the changes that we might have to make to be successful. So there's an illustration I want to share with you guys that I found really powerful, and I hope it will help you. If someone offered to give you $100 if you would walk a 10-inch wide plank for 30 feet, how many of us would take them up on that? For $100, you just need to walk this plank that's on the ground. It's 30 foot long and 10 inches wide. And that's kind of like that goal that we just kind of throw out there because it sounds good. You know, really, it's not a stretch. It's nothing big. We don't necessarily achieve a whole lot, but it's something we would do because it's easy. Now, if I took that same plank and put it on top of two 30-story buildings and said, would you walk across that building for $100, across that plank for $100? It's still 30 feet. It's still 10 inches wide. Most of us will say probably not, probably not. But then this is where the why kicks in. This is where the why kicks in. What if I asked you to walk across that same plank, 10 inches wide, 30 foot long, on top of two 30-story buildings, and I'm going to give you $100. And the other building's on fire, but someone you love or cared about, like a child, a spouse, someone that you couldn't see life without, was on the other side. And most of us would probably at least attempt that walk. The difference is when it's on the ground and easy, it's not so important. When it's something that means something to us, that becomes the why. And one of the biggest reasons that our goals fail is because they have nothing to do with what we really want to attain in life. They're like sidebars. Some people talk about getting healthy. Okay, so why do you want to be healthy? What does that mean for you? When you start thinking about the different lifestyles and the things that it might change for you, that's the part that gets you motivated. That's the part that gets you out of the bed. And that's the part that will make you be more successful in setting your goals. This idea was from Darren Hardy, and one of the books that I'm going to share with you guys is called The Compound Effect. Some people like it, some people don't. I found some really, really good thoughts in there for me, and I hope that you will find them as well if you choose to read it. So that's a little bit about the visioning and understanding that you need to know what the why is in terms of being more successful. The second thing on that list was all about our mindset. So what happens a lot of times is we don't realize the tie between what our beliefs are, what we grew up knowing, what we think is right, influence our thoughts. And then the thoughts that we have, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, become our words. Those words then become the actions that we take. The actions become the habits become the values, and the values become your destiny, as Gandhi said. Here's the short version that we use a lot in coaching. What we believe drives what we think drives what we do drives what our outcomes are. Let me give you a simple example. I don't think they would be interested in hiring me because I'm really not the best candidate. So I'm not going to apply for that job. So I will not get that job because I never even applied. You see how that circular effect happens? So one of the things we need to look at is what's going on in our head. And when we talk about mindset, what are those thoughts? And then even more importantly, what do we need to do to actually change them? The other part about thinking about what it is that goes through your head is that oftentimes when something happens, when there's a failure, when something doesn't go to what we want, we look at other reasons, other people and other things to justify why it happened. So it's not something that we had any control over. Now, when I say that, it doesn't mean you have control over your life. But what it does say is that some of your actions, most of your actions, you have control over. Now, when we give up all the control and say, well, this is what happened to me, I couldn't do anything else about it, it's what we call victim thinking. And this is not to be negative about it, but I want you to know that when you say everything else made it happen and you had no impact, you also have no power to change it. But if you can reassess the way you think about it and say, okay, maybe my doing this was not the best choice. Maybe doing this instead would have helped, but it doesn't change it. But what it does do is it empowers you. It gives you a sense of power because there are things you can do to change the outcome. When we don't believe we can change the outcome, we're a lot less likely to do anything differently. When we accept that our actions are something that we can choose, then we also become empowered. When we talk about mindset, another one is the principle of Kaizen. So if those of you who are old enough on this call who may remember, there was a time when somebody said a product was made in Japan, and it was a joke because that meant that it was cheap and it would break easily and it was not worth anything. But what we saw over time was Japan as a country adopted this principle called Kaizen, or continuous learning. And the ideal is that no matter what you do, whether it's successful or not, you look at it and you say, okay, what do I need to do differently to make it better? What do I need to do differently to make it better? And what we saw in Japan, and we've seen it in other places too, but this is where this originated, was that they became these powerhouses for cars like Toyota, who people said, this is a superior car, not just as good as what they were saying before, but it's actually superior. They were the Sony people who came out with a lot of that technology. So the ideal of us looking at ourselves and our actions and what we do and say, okay, this was good, or maybe not so good, but more importantly, what can I do to make it better? Becomes really critical when we talk about mindset. At the end of the day, the point is when you change the thoughts in your head, when you change the way you process it, then you will actually see different results. The third thing that was on that list that we looked at was that we needed to be able to create a plan. And the plan is the thing that we don't get to. We set the goal, we put a number out there or something that we want to achieve, but we don't have a plan to achieve it. So when you have a goal that sits out in December and it's January, you have plenty of time to make it happen. When you have a goal that happens in 10 days, you have to take action most of the time to make it happen. So what we want to do when we look at that is take that goal and break it into smaller chunks so that we're working on it continuously and not at the last minute and then we throw up our hands and say, well, we'll never make it at that point. I hope that makes sense to you. But the point is we need to have a plan. A lot of times I see people do vision boards, which are beautiful because they look and they think about what it is they really want and they imagine it and they put it in the forefront of their head. To make that successful is you have to keep coming back at it and looking at it again and stay focused on it and take action so that it becomes a reality for you.
Deborah, excuse me. This is
Yes, ma'am.
Kristen. Just, I don't see a vision board right now. We have Gandhi.
Nope, there isn't one.
Okay, just making sure.
Okay, thanks for checking. I appreciate
Thank you.
it.
We had a question too, just to make sure that we had the right one.
Okay,
Thanks.
no. So because I'm just going to talk about the concepts. I won't show pictures for everything because then I'd have a whole lot of slides. Vision board, if you don't know what it is where you take and you create a visual representation of things that you want to come to pass in your life. And it's very, very powerful tool because it goes back to the first thing, which was creating a vision for yourself, creating a direction as to where you want to go. The failure a lot of times is we create the vision board, but we don't focus on it and revisit it enough to make it happen. We don't put it together and we don't put a plan together that will help us actually achieve it. But it's a beautiful, beautiful place to start. It's a beautiful way to create a vision for yourself and where you want to go. So We want to turn that vision board into a reality. We want to think about the thoughts that are going through our head. When we come back to mindset, we really have to make a few really big shifts. The first one is your time is at least as valuable as the time of others. And what do I mean by that is that when you are working on your calendar, when you're deciding how you're going to spend your precious commodity of time, you are actually thinking about what is it I need to do to get closer to my goal? What is it I need to do to get closer to that goal I want to achieve in January or December or whatever that is? And make sure that that is going into how you allocate your time. In other words, taking responsibility for your time and allocating it towards the things that are important to you. The second one is you cannot get everything done. You can't. None of us can. But that comes back to what are your priorities? And priorities being the things that are important to you. They may not be the things that are important to your friends. They may not be things that are important even to your family, but what is important to you? I'm not saying at the expense of everybody else, but what's important to you and where is that in terms of how you're going to spend your time and your resources? The fourth one is we really need to shift to working on our high priority stuff first. The things that are going to drive us to achieve what we want to achieve. And the last one goes back to a quote by Einstein, where he talks about the definition of insanity requires us to do something. And, we're doing the same thing over and over and expecting something different. So doing the same thing over and over and expecting something different. For us to have a breakthrough, for us to have that mindset shift, we have to do things differently. And sometimes those things differently are just uncomfortable. In fact, a lot of times when you are uncomfortable, it's because you are stretching a little bit further than your comfort zone. Okay? So we've talked about visioning. We've talked about mindset shifts. I want to talk a little bit about some of the keys to setting and achieving goals, and then we're going to dip down a little bit further into how you actually go about doing that. The first one is coming back to your why. Understanding what it is and making sure that you've connected it to the goals that you set for yourself. The second one is creating that plan that we just talked about. The third one is to focus. So if you remember, I said when you create the vision board, if you decide to do that, you need to come back and look at it on a regular basis so you can stay focused. It's the same thing with your goals. We need to revisit them. And what we do a lot when I'm working with coaching clients is we actually do our planning in a 12-week mode. So instead of having a full year to get something done, you've got 12 weeks. So we're just closing that window a little bit so we feel more inclined to take action. But then we also say, what are the top 2, maybe 3 things you're going to focus on during this quarter? Now, that doesn't mean all the other stuff doesn't have to happen. But this means I'm going to be looking at these 3 things every day, every week, every month to see how am I doing on this. When you do that, you don't lose focus. They don't fall off the table. And you don't look 3 months later and say, oh yeah, that was a goal in January that I started, but never really did anything with, because it's in your face. It's in your face, so you have to look at it. We want to focus not just on everything that we could do to achieve a goal. We want to say, what are the few things that will get us the biggest results? And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second when I talk about mind mapping. But most of the time, if you want to get someplace or go somewhere, think about taking a trip. You can take a variety of routes to get there. But in this case, if you're trying to achieve a goal, we'll say, what are the ones that are going to get us closest to the goal? What are the ones that are going to be the most efficient way to get there? Now, efficiency isn't necessarily always the best if you're trying to learn along the way, but understand that you need to say, what are the critical few things that I can do to help me achieve this goal? And then the last one on there is the habit changes. So most of our actions are driven by habits. It's things that we've done over and over and over again. And then back to Einstein, definition of insanity, doing the same things over and over again. So one of the things that we have to do to make this happen, especially if these goals are something different for us and take us in a different direction, is we have to be able to look at the habits we currently have and say, which of these do I need to keep? Which of these might I need to change? And that's what we call doing a habit inventory. If you download the worksheet that I'm going to, the workbook I'm sharing with you guys, there is a little habit inventory in there for you, where you go down and you just make a list. Here's the goal I want to achieve. What are the habits that I have that will support it? What are the habits that I have that will probably prevent me from getting it? And what changes am I willing to make to achieve that goal? So some of the pitfalls, again, we talked about the difference between success and not being successful. But when we talk about goals specifically, there's some things. The why keeps coming up. I want you to remember that. Whatever goals you're setting, tie them to your why. What will it mean to you? What difference will your life have? What difference will your business have? Whatever that goal is, why is it meaningful? If you can't get to the why, you might not have the right goal. Lack of a plan. The other one is trying to change everything at once. Most of us can't flip a dime and tomorrow change our whole life. But what we can do is break it down into smaller steps that we can work towards over a period of time, i.e. developing new habits so that we can actually achieve it. Not keeping it simple. This goes back to the whole ideal of taking the least amount of steps that we have to get there. So we don't want to say we're going to do 50 new things tomorrow so we can achieve this goal. Well, so maybe this first week we'll work on this one thing that we know will have impact. And then that second week we'll add another one. And maybe in the third week we'll add another one. That's the way we approach it when we're going to be successful. The biggest one that a lot of us fail at is keeping score. And this is where we're tracking how are we doing in terms of moving towards that goal, but just important, how are we doing on the actions that we've identified? And again, I hope this will become a little bit plainer as I run through an example with you. And we focus too much on the outcome. We focus sometimes too much on the outcome of the goal as opposed to the behaviors or the habits that will help us to achieve it. And last but not least, we do it alone. We don't have that partner or somebody who's going to help us stay accountable to ourselves. There's a quote, I can't remember who said it, but he says, we lie loudest when we lie to ourselves. So we lie loudest when we lie to ourselves. So we lie to ourselves about what our true intent is and what our true effort is. And it's like more so than we would to anybody else. But when we have an accountability partner who is going to be honest with us and give us real feedback, and honestly talk to us about expectations and holding us to our own goals, there's such a tremendous difference in terms of being successful. Okay, so let's talk specifically about writing goals and writing effective goals. Most of us have heard of the acronym SMART, meaning that the goal needs to be very specific. You know, it doesn't need to be, I want to be happy. You know, it needs to be, I want to do these things because these things will make me happy. But what are the actual things that you can measure? It needs to be measurable. It needs to be something that's actually attainable for you. But at the same time, it needs to be something that takes effort. So let me give you an example. If my goal is to do something that takes me 5 minutes to do it, not that it's a bad goal, but that's not really a goal because I'm not motivated to do it because I'll say, well, you know, if it takes 5 minutes, I can do it tomorrow. I can do it the day after tomorrow. It needs to be a bit of a stretch because we're trying to grow ourselves. The last one is huge. It has to have a time frame on it. So let me show you the difference. I want to grow my business by 100,000 in new revenue this year. I have a deadline. So now I know I need to do things to get there. But if I say I want to grow my business by 100,000 in revenue, okay, is that today, tomorrow, next year? Depending on the answer, the actions I have to take will differ, and the time frame for the actions that I have to take. So if you have not heard of this acronym, when you write a goal, check this list. Is it specific? So you know exactly whether or not you've achieved it or not. How are you going to measure it? Is it attainable? Is it a bit of a stretch for you? And what's the time frame? So one of the ways that I like to work with people doing or setting their goals is to get them to step out of the box. So depending on whether or not you're a creative person or not, people who are more not creative, more logic driven, they tend to want to write a list. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The issue with that is that while we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we're tossing out ideas that could be really, really good. So a great way to approach this is something called mind mapping. So I'm going to show you a simplistic version of that. And in the workbook, there's a place where you can do the same thing. But here's how it starts. I take the goal that I want to achieve and I put it smack in the middle of this sheet of paper. And it works with a blank sheet of paper very well, by the way. That's all you need at this point. Then I want to take every ideal I can think of that would help me achieve this goal, and I'm going to write it down. Not that one is more important, one is better. I'm not trying to decide that at this point. I'm just brainstorming, but I'm brainstorming in a non-linear fashion. So anything I think of that might actually help me, I'm going to put it down. So for me, in this example, I want to do 100,000 in new sales by 12/31. So how could I do that? Well, let's go back and look. Let me think. If I got more referrals, that would probably help me. Yeah. If I talk to more centers of influence or strategic partners, they might be able to help me develop more business or be able to send referrals my way. If I have more client appointments, maybe I can talk to them about some of the things they're doing and talk about how I might be able to help them with those. That might increase that revenue. If I wanted to upsell an existing client, in other words, sell them more of something else they don't necessarily have. If I had a seminar, I'd get a chance to get in front of maybe some new people and be able to sell to them there. PPC, for those who don't know, is pay per click. That's online marketing. I could host an event. Again, I'm just trying to get exposure to new opportunities for increasing revenue. Run a contest, make some cold calls, call people I don't even know and just talk to them and say, hey, this is what I do. I can up my branding, make it better. All of these things are things that I could actually do. Now, let me give you another example. This is not drawn. Depends on where you're coming from. It might make more sense. I want to lose 20 pounds by November because I'm going on a cruise, making that up. So then I would say to myself, so what are the things that I might need to do to make that happen? Well, I need to change my diet because it's not very good for me. I might need to do some exercise. I might need a partner to work with me. I might need to drink more water. Those are things that would go in those same circles. But I want to just capture everything, not trying to decide which ones I'm going to do first, just capture them. The next step is to take these ideals, these concepts that I popped up, and turn them into tactics. So what I want to do at this point is where I go back and say, okay, what is the one thing I can do that would probably have the most impact? And then I'm going to circle that. So in this case, I said referrals. That would be the easiest and the most impactful thing I can do is to get more referrals. Now, you ask yourself, would that get me to the goal? If it doesn't, then you say, okay, what's the second thing I could do that helps me get me closer to that goal? In this case, I'm going to say, well, those centers of influence, working with those centers of influence or strategic partners. Okay, so I've got two things I've identified. I'm still not at my goal. I don't think I can make it with just those two things. What else? Same thing. I added in a third one, the seminar. What else? And I keep asking what else till I get to the point where I have enough that I think will get me to the goal. So I'm not throwing out any ideals. In fact, I may come back to the same worksheet if things don't work out, if I'm not getting as much traction or growing as fast as I want. But I've captured them, and then this is a way to decide which ones I'm going to focus on. Remember, we talked about focus being one of the things that will make you successful. So then I take it and I just translate it into this format. And I said, okay, so these are the 4 things I've identified that will help me. When am I going to do them? As I mentioned earlier, work on a 12-week period for your year because it makes that window smaller. You're much more likely to do activities that you need to do. And you're not going to get halfway through the year and realize you're not even close to any of your goals. It gives you a chance to check that that much faster and to be on track. So in this case, I said, well, I'm going to do a seminar in the 6th week and the 12th week. So I'd be looking at the calendar and say, what dates are those? I want to get 1 referral per week from a current client. And I want to do that every week for the next 12 weeks, starting next week. Same thing with the other ones. Now, these are big things, right? These are big things that are tactics. But I'm going to come back and break each of these into action steps. For example, if I'm going to host a seminar, I would say, what's my topic? What's my date on it? Where am I going to host it? Who am I going to invite? All of those things become an action item list, and those action items go on to my calendar, things that I need to do. This is how we're going from having this goal that's nice and beautiful and big down to how do we make it work? How do we get there? This is the plan. Does that make sense? Now, word of caution, when you're setting goals for yourself, you should be working on maybe 1, 2, no more than 3 big goals at a time, because life will still happen. You'll still have the children, you'll still have work, you'll still have whatever else is happening in your life. But this allows you to say, this thing I'm going to focus on for this 12 weeks, and this is how far I'm going to get. So my goal for the year in that example was 100,000. Maybe in that first quarter, I only want to do 25. And I can break that into steps. What do I need to do? That's the way we get started. We use it as a tool to build it out, and we do that for each of our goals. Again, thinking 1, 2, 3 at the most at a time. You got 12 goals, the chances of you being successful goes down quite a bit. Once we have the goals set up, breaking them down into action items, we need to move to the fourth thing that was on that sheet, which is scorekeeping. Remember I mentioned earlier that one of the reasons we fail is that we don't keep score? If you're in the game and you're playing and you don't know if you're winning or losing, how do you know what actions you need to take to be more successful? So scorekeeping is most critical. You want to make it simple. It shouldn't be something that's really complicated. A lot of times when I work with clients, we develop our own little scorecard for them based on what they want to do. But this is the thing to remember about this. Your outcomes, whether or not you're reaching this goal, are going to be more dependent on your actions, not necessarily the results. The outcomes are going to be dependent on the actions. The beautiful part about that is that you are driving the actions. You're driving that execution process. You have more control over your actions than you do the outcomes. Example, I want to lose the 20 pounds. I can't necessarily ensure that I'm going to lose that 20 pounds, but if I know the actions that will get me there, I can measure those and see if I'm staying on track with them. Now, if I'm doing the actions that I've outlined and I'm not getting closer to the goal, I need to change the actions. If I'm not doing the actions, then I need to start doing them. So you can control the actions, but you cannot necessarily control the outcomes. The same thing in sales. You know what you want to get in sales. You know what activities tend to get you the sales, but you can't make a person buy from you. But can you talk to enough people to hit the number that you need? Probably. Can you do enough follow-ups to hit the number that you need? Probably. You have more control over your actions than your outcomes. So when you're keeping score, you want to keep score not just of how close you are to the goal, but how well are you doing the actions that you outlined that will get you there. It's critical that you measure your execution of the actions as well as the results. And I would say you want to measure those on a daily or weekly basis, because if you get 3 weeks out and you realize you're 30 behind, then you can make it up. You get 3 months out and you're 130 behind, it's a lot harder to do it. I hope that makes sense to you. The next thing on that list of what we needed to do to be successful is to be prepared to deal with the obstacles that are going to come up. They will come up. That's a promise. But here are some things to think about. The limiting beliefs we want to deal with by starting to change the way we think. That means we want to change the self-talk from I can't to I can. I won't till I will. We want to start to work on the diet, right? We want to start putting good things in our head. So if you're trying to grow your business, what are the podcasts that you're listening to? What are you reading? Who are the people that you're around actually? What are they feeding you? We want to think about the habits that we have. I guess take an inventory. Based on this goal, what are the things that I need to do more of that are my habits? What are the things I might need to change? And what are the ones that I'm going to change? Keeping in mind, we're not going to try and change them all at one time. We're going to do it over a period of time. Managing your time, putting yourself on your calendar, making your priorities part of what you plan, part of what you execute, not just everybody else's plan. If there's a skill set that you need that you don't have, how are you going to get it? There's so many resources. I mean, you guys are on the Plano library call. There's so many resources in that library that can help you with whatever it is you're trying to do. There's so many great books, there's podcasts, there's meetings, so much out there that can become overwhelming. But if you have a plan as to where you're trying to go and what you need to do, you can choose the right resources to get the knowledge that you need. And again, I keep saying diet. Think about what you're feeding your mind. Think about what's going in your head. Think about the whole ideal of Kaizen. You want to continuously get better. So I know we went through some turf there. I hope I gave you something to think about. I want you to make sure you start with the first one is, what are the things that are keeping me from being successful? Am I running on autopilot, not thinking about what's important to me? Does my mindset need a lot of work because it's always focused on what I can't do instead of what I can do? What am I putting in my head? What am I putting on my body? That definitely has an impact as well. Am I using procrastination as a reason for not doing what I need to do? And then the last one that was on that list that I hit really quickly, but it's fear. And Les Brown has a great quote on that. He says, too many of us are not living our dreams because we are living our fears. So we're more concerned day to day with what we're avoiding than being concerned about what we want to have manifest in this life. We're looking at that half empty glass instead of the half full glass. That's it in a nutshell. Remember to take the goal, no more than 3, preferably 1 or 2. Break it into pieces that you can get your arms around. Measure it, but make sure that goal is tied back to your vision and you understand why it's important to you. I want to close just basically by sharing a couple of resources with you. One of them is a series of books that are at the Plano Library, by the way, but 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It's an awesome book. It's one of those you read it and you read again and you learn more stuff. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, where he talks about making incremental changes that will lead to huge changes in your life. The 12-week year, especially if you own a business, it talks about planning in that 12-week time frame. And then Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about how to change the habits that we have so we can be more successful and get the things we want in life. I've also uploaded a workbook for you guys to go out and grab if you like. It's going to be at chaos2resultscoaching.com/resources. Now, we'll tell you, I've got some other stuff out there from a webinar earlier this week. I'm going to take them all down on Sunday evening. So if you think you want the workbook, please go out and download it today or tomorrow. Thank you all so much for listening to me. I hope I've given you something that you can use and that'll be powerful for you. It's truly been a pleasure talking with you or talking to you. Have a great day.
If anyone would like to ask questions of Debra, you're welcome to type them in the chat. And thank you so much, Debra, for the great information that you've shared with us. We'll be watching the chat. And meanwhile, I'm going to give you just a little bit of information about library resources that are available to you at no cost with a library card. The library, Plano Public Library, is more than books. Obviously, there are plenty of books and resources available to you, but we also have online programming or resources for you. For instance, with a library card, you have free access to lynda.com. There are over 6,000 courses and certifications that are available through lynda.com, which is sometimes also known as LinkedIn Learning. And there is a subscription price to it, but when you have a library card, you get access for free. Some of the skill building resources that are available include programs on or courses on project management, financial management, leadership, marketing, the things that I've listed here, and far more. There are technology classes, how to use Excel, Windows, different databases, even web design, digital creativity, graphics, and just so much that you can learn on lynda.com. And we also have other resources for learning, including the Great Courses. And if you haven't heard of the Great Courses, they're really like a series of video programs on a particular topic. Some of them were listed on the last slide. Public speaking, thank you, nonverbal communication, how to program, computer programming, photography. There's so many to choose from. So you can access the Great Courses either through Canopy on the library website or also through RB Digital. Those are on the eBooks and More page. That we also are offering these sorts of career development programs through Zoom that you've heard Debra deliver today. We have some other things that are coming up that I'll show you in a minute. There are also resources for if you're interested in building your own business or you have a small business, there are business research tools and marketing through Reference USA. And we also have a small business reference center that are available no cost from the library. Those are in the on our Learn page under Research and Learn. There's a SCORE mentor available to you. He's been coming to the library until now that we have been closed right now. He is taking appointments by phone and virtual appointments. His name is Don Walter, and we can get you that the information's on our website also, but we can get you that phone number to call for a SCORE mentor. We also have resources that help you explore career options. If you are not sure where you want to be working or investing your time, or you're just looking for something different or new, we have resources there. And also a program that's called Book a Librarian, where you can actually schedule a 30-minute appointment with a librarian to help you learn whatever it is that you want to learn: how to use Canopy, how to use the Small Business Reference Center. You're trying to do something specific in Excel, let's say, working on a budget or something in Excel, and you can't figure out a certain feature, a librarian can help you. So you can book a half-hour appointment with a librarian. And then also just staying in the know, keeping up with what's going on. We offer free access to the New York Times, the Dallas Morning News, and really newspapers from around the world through Press Reader. That's also under ebooks and more on the library website. We have access to over 100 e-magazines. I've given you a few of the names there. And we have so many books available that were written by or about business leaders like Sam Walton, Martha Stewart, Steve Jobs, Sheryl Sandberg, Melinda Gates, and there are lots more. So, browse our e-collection and read something. The books that Debra mentioned obviously are already there as well. And then just on the lighter side, some things that we wanted to mention for you today, that we also have classes, kits, and magazines related to creativity and arts. We have a bullet journaling class that we had a couple weeks ago. I'm sure we'll be repeating that at some point. We have language learning available. There's an app called Pronunciator where you can learn 80 different languages, more than 80 different languages online, or actually it can also be used as a tool for learning English. You can set, say, Japanese as the primary language and then learn English from there. Then we have other family engagement activities. So if you have children in your life, there are lots of activities for building creativity and technology and learning in them. So with our STEAM activities and many, many other things. Some of the databases also available online. Upcoming classes, we have an intro to business writing, to writing a business plan. That is being presented by SCORE, which is the Service Corps of Retired Executives, and they are a business partner with the Small Business Administration. So that is an intro to writing a business plan. We are providing training on some tech tools using GIMP for graphics. Then we have some Google workshops, how to get your business online with Google Search and Maps. And then we have another one coming up on digital skills with some Google tools. And coming in June, and we have many, many other things that are in the works for June and July, but we don't have all of them outlined yet. So keep watching planolibrary.org for more. But on June 11th, we have Navigate Your Future, which is a career exploration, lots of tools for looking at different sorts of careers and what the outlook is for those careers and how you get the training to be successful in those careers. So this is the end of our presentation today. planolibrary.org is our website. We'd love to see you there. We thank you for participating today. And I do have information for a couple of you, and we will definitely follow up with you on the resources that you're asking about. Actually, TOEFL test, yes, is included in some of those online resources. There's test prep resources for college and for career. So all of those things are available through the library. We're really happy to have you here today. And thank you again so much to Debra. We appreciate the time that Debra has invested in this. And I hope you all have a wonderful, productive day and keep learning.